This video is brought to you by Atlas VPN. Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and this is a platform where we value truth, facts, reason and logic. And if the truth offends some people, let them be offended. The question were the ancient Egyptians black is actually quite complicated. It's multi-layered. I'll try to bring as much clarity as possible in this video, as often the matter is rooted on a variety of political expectations, agendas and the imposition of current perspectives and attitudes to depict and interpret past events in order to bend them in one's favor. A cauldron of personal bias and lies on any sides of the spectrum. Not how you do real and professional academic work. So were they black, were they not black, does it even matter? Well, yes, it does, but it is only one among many other possible questions, such as how did they organize their armies, when did they reach the Bronze Age, how did they tackle commerce, what was their religion like, and a myriad more. All of these questions matter because they help us better understand a people, a civilization, their story. You create history by asking questions. Now, the question about their ethnicity becomes even more relevant when you are confronted by a group of people that tells you that the ancient Egyptians were black, the ancient Romans were black, the ancient Greeks were black, and if you disagree, you're a white supremacist and a racist. Trying to bend people into agreeing with you with the usage of insults and name-calling without evidence or in spite of contrasting evidence is ludicrous. It is a symptom of a feeble argument born from a weak mind. It is, however, important to underline that this is not a white versus black scenario. I unite with my white brothers, my black brothers, people of all ethnicity that value the truth, backed up by evidence, versus irrational, convoluted and politically motivated annoying people. Let me show you. Cleopatra. I think everybody has heard of her, but I don't know if you've heard that there is a group of people that say that she was black because she was the queen of Egypt. Egypt is in, Africa, therefore she was the queen of Africa, she was African, and she was black. And if you disagree, yes, you guessed it. Check this tweet out. I am not sorry to tell you all, but Rihanna definitely has that role owned. Gaga and AJ shouldn't have even been in the running. Honestly, if a black woman ain't playing Cleopatra, then nobody should play the African Egyptian Queen Cleopatra, period. It's very interesting that he would say that, first of all, because that's not a representation of Cleopatra, that's a representation of Nefertiti. Somebody else points that out under the comment section and he responds by saying, "Huh, white boy, I know who she's dressed as, it was a reference point." We don't believe that. But regardless of whether he knew that or not, the statement is still very ignorant. Cleopatra came from a dynasty of conquering Greeks. Her ancestor was a general of Alexander the Great's army. She was born in Egypt, but she wasn't a native Egyptian. She was Greek, her father was from Cyprus, and therefore she didn't share the same phenotypic traits with the local population. All rulers from the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt from 305 BC to 30 BC would have been Greek. We don't know exactly in details what she looked like. She was described as being very attractive and very intelligent, but we do know that she would have looked like a Southern European, a Greek of the time. Now, I happen to be a Southern European. I'm from the Mediterranean. I'm Sicilian. I happen to be on the pale side. Maybe she looked like me. Maybe her skin would have been a bit more tanned, perhaps olive color. Still, she wouldn't have looked like a native African Egyptian. And we've got statues that show her hair and face structure and nose structure together with some coins. Again, clearly Greek. Saying that Cleopatra needs to be represented by a black actress because she was from Egypt and she was the queen of Egypt, it's like saying in 300 years from now that George Washington is supposed to look like a Native American because he was born in America and he was the president of the American United States. Okay, fantastic, but what about all of the other pharaohs? What about the actual general population, the Egyptians? What did they look like? To answer this professionally in the most accurate way possible, we have to examine Egyptian art, understand how they utilized color to represent themselves and their neighbors, and we'll address the term KEMET, the word the Egyptians used to refer to Egypt. We'll talk about an article that deals with the first successful genomic testing on ancient Egyptian mummies, where the mitochondrial genomes of 90 mummies were taken, and we'll discuss the results together. You'll find links in the description below for further reference. This and much more after a brief word from our sponsor. And now I'd like to take a moment to mention the sponsor that made this video possible, Atlas VPN. But what is a VPN, you ask? A VPN is a virtual private network that makes all of your internet traffic travel through an encrypted tunnel, and this way it protects you from spying, public Wi-Fi dangers, it hides your IP address and online activities. Atlas VPN is a great choice because it was developed by cybersecurity specialists, and among other things, it also gives you access to the Data Breach Monitor, which is a security feature designed to track any data breaches related to your online accounts, automatically scanning any leaked information. But another add-on through Atlas VPN is the fact that you can use Netflix from any country, regardless of where you are based. So let's say you wanted to watch a show that they only broadcast in the USA, but you were in Britain. No problem, just change your country through the VPN and boom, access granted. I personally always have Atlas VPN active on all of my machines, because one account lets you use unlimited devices. Atlas VPN is very affordable. Right now, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount. For only $1.99 a month, you can get a 3-year subscription, 30-day money-back guarantee. Only $1.99 a month. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and enjoy your safety. Welcome back. The only way to answer this is to make sure that you and I both know what we mean exactly with the word black. And I've noticed that some academics these days love dancing around this one because it's controversial and they don't want to offend anyone. So what do? They say, oh, but the ancient Egyptians didn't have these modern concept of black people and white people. That's a modern construct. So they were neither. That's dodging the question. So let me be 100% crystal clear here. Did the entirety of the population of Egypt, or the majority of the population of Egypt, look like this handsome man? No. The ancient Egyptians were a multi-ethnic African civilization. It was multi-ethnic because of its very geographical position, a connection between Africa, the Mediterranean basin, and Asia, a strategic location on the crossroads of continents. The Egyptian civilization flourished around the Nile River, which was a cultural conduit of civilization. There is diversity in the skin of the Egyptians. Through time and space, the ethnic percentages will differ depending on what area of Egypt and which era. Egypt is not disconnected from the rest of Africa, and it is absolutely imperative to fully appreciate the complexity and connectivity of such a geographical area. However, the ancient Egyptians did acknowledge and recognize the physical differences between them and their neighbors, specifically utilizing skin tone as one of the major distinguishing factors, already disproving this idea pushed by some people that the ancient Egyptians didn't even see a difference in skin tone and that that's only something that we modern people see. Probably humankind has been noticing that difference since prehistorical period. Of course, the ancients didn't share the same beliefs and classifications as 19th century, 20th century and 21st century people when it comes to the words that we use to identify people and how we use them. Even in my case, I have recently immigrated into the United States of America, and when I was filling in my immigration sheets, they asked me to put the ethnicity section, and when I asked, so what should I put? They said, just put white. Well, if this was the 1920s in the same United States of America, they would have had me write either Italian as a separate ethnicity or, as it did happen, black, depending on, I suppose, on your skin tone, maybe, I don't know. These classifications are indeed fluid, but I think we all know what we mean when we say black. Like this guy. Here is what the Egyptians said. Look at this image. To the right, you see how the Egyptians represented themselves. The black gentleman is representing a Nubian, basically a member of the very prominent and very powerful and advanced kingdom of Kush, which was south of Egypt, and those are representations of an Asiatic and a Libyan. Of course, it's important to take into consideration the cultural and commercial and religious exchanges that happened between the kingdom of Kush and Egypt. Of course, a certain percentage of Nubians, which will differ depending on which area of Egypt we are talking about, will have lived among the Egyptians. But the Egyptians do represent themselves with this image, with this specific color. And with color and art, we enter a whole new range of topics that I'd like to hopefully simplify for this video. How did the Egyptians use and create color, and why do Egyptian women almost always look lighter in skin than their men? And was there any inner and sometimes hidden meaning within color itself. Well, each color was created by mixing various naturally occurring elements, and each became standardized in time in order to ensure a uniformity in artwork. An Egyptian male was always depicted with a reddish-brown skin, which was achieved by mixing a certain amount of standard red paint with standard brown. Experts say that this color was chosen because it was a realistic representation of the average Egyptian. Women's skin instead was most of the time represented with a mixture of yellow and white, and the reason of the explanation to this is because women tended to work the field a lot less than men. They tended to stay inside, and therefore their skin was lighter. If the difference in skin tone between men and women is darker or lighter depending on how much time they spend outside, then it suggests that even the darker tones we see are mostly a tan rather than the actual natural color that all Egyptians would have. So it is possible that a light brown would be a good representation when it comes to what the ancient Egyptian skin looked like. If they were all black in the sense of a Nubian, they would not represent the Nubians and themselves differently in art, and of course a Nubian's skin color is gonna be black whether he stays inside or outside. The gods are represented with many colors, but they are symbolic when it comes to their skin. They can have a red skin, which usually has to do with aggression and evil in a way, although it can also symbolize life. Some gods have a blue skin, which represents protection and wisdom. Other gods have a green skin, such as oftentimes Osiris, because it's a connection to the afterlife. And when it comes to black skin in Egyptian art, even though it does have a connection to death, which is why we sometimes see gods such as Anubis having black skin, it was not connected to evil. Red was. So what about the term KEMET? Well, KEMET has been used again by some people trying to push this idea that all Egyptians were black and it was a black civilization, because they say that it means the land of the black, and therefore if the Egyptians refer to their own land as this is the land of the black, then it means that they consider themselves black. But it's interesting that the people that I've read in forums, they say this, but then a minute before that, they actually say, oh, but the Egyptians did never refer to themselves or other people as black and white and brown. That's a modern construct. And this already shows you lack of intellectual honesty, because you can't say that the Egyptian didn't use black, brown and white to describe people, and then a minute afterwards use it when it comes to the translation of the word KEMET when it's convenient to you. KEMET meant black land, meaning that was the color of the land, the soil. Scholars generally believe that this name derived from the fertile soil that was left over when the Nile flood receded in August. Considering the fact that the very people that pushed this idea of all the ancient Egyptians were black did say on multiple occasions that the Egyptians did not use color as a word to describe people, then I would say on their own terms that it is more probable that KEMET referred to the land being black, not the people. But when it comes to the analysis of DNA, there are several methods the scientists can use, including the direct PCR, a method of DNA amplification directly from an animal or plant tissue sample without performing DNA isolation and purification steps. This technique greatly reduces experimental time and cost in genotyping and high-volume projects, but it does come with issues surrounding the authentication of the retrieved DNA and the potential contaminations inherent to this method. Say the hot Egyptian climate, the high humidity levels in many tombs, and some of the chemicals used in mummification techniques, in particular sodium carbonate. All of these contribute to DNA degradation and are thought to render the long-term preservation of the DNA of mummies improbable. Now, some of you might ask, why bother with ancient mummies at all? Why don't you just check and analyze the DNA on modern-day Egyptians? And the thing is that in order to do that, you would have to have a perfect genetic continuity over thousands of years, millennia, and that is very improbable considering the recent population admixtures from both other areas of Africa, Europe, considering Roman and Greek colonization, and the Islamic expansion. Even without genetic proof, it would be very unlikely to expect such a perfect continuity between ancient Egyptians and modern Egyptians, and this study in fact demonstrates so. 166 samples from 151 mummified individuals were examined for this study, 90 of which you will find in the later analysis in the supplementary data 1. According to radiocarbon dates, these samples can be classified into 3 time periods: pre-Ptolemaic, Ptolemaic and Roman period. Scientists found that the 3 ancient Egyptian group clusters supported a certain level of genetic continuity over 1300 years, but showed a higher affinity with modern-day people from the Levant and the Middle East, an affinity supported on some of the individuals with the find of the Y chromosome haplogroups. On the nuclear level, scientists joined their data, called the SNP data, together with both ancient genomes and modern-day genomes, and found that the ancient Egyptian samples were further away from modern-day Egyptians and closer to the modern-day Near Easterners and Europeans. The scientists that performed these tests were extremely professional, but you can imagine that both Afrocentric groups and Eurocentric groups tried to use these and tackle these differently, with Eurocentric trying to then prove that the ancient Egyptians were European and they were white, and Afrocentric trying to instead saying that these mummies probably were just foreigners and were not actual Egyptians. I do think that the truth lies in the middle, meaning that even though we do need to accept the fact that this test only deals with the mummies found in a specific area in Middle Egypt, therefore it does not necessarily represent the genetic makeup of the entirety of the population of all of Egypt, and of course there would have been variety. But it does strengthen the idea that Egypt was a multi-ethnic society, and some of the Egyptians that lived and were mummified in Egypt would have been considered from a modern-day standard perhaps even white. Does that mean that the ancient Egyptian is a white or a European civilization? I don't think so. I think that more studies on mummies will probably reveal that the southern part of Egypt had a higher percentage of individuals that we would today call black, and I'm still inclined to believe that the majority of the Egyptian population would have been the tanned, olive-skinned people. Egypt was an African civilization, but it wasn't living in a vacuum. It was in a specific geolocation that connected the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Southern Europe. And we do know, and we have Roman authors and Greek authors that tell us that there were areas and cities whereby the Greek settlements were so significant that up to 30% of the population was Greek, in towns that we would otherwise just call ancient Egyptian. And classical authors do tell us that after a few generations, the only way to really distinguish these people was to hear how they spoke and what language they used. So considering the data we have available right now, my opinion is that the Egyptians were a multi-ethnic population. The majority would have been brown, some would have been black, some might have been white. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong by new data. In fact, that is the very basis of this video that I would like, the message that I would like to leave with this video. This, in my opinion, is the most sensible position considering the data we have available. But we always have to be open-minded. If by next year we analyze a huge amount of mummies and we see that instead the majority of Egyptians were black, I will be more than happy to say I was wrong. And I will be in fact fascinated by this discovery. But the same way, if we do find out instead that, again, a huge amount of mummies were analyzed and they once again show a genetic connection with Southern Europeans and people of the Levant, maybe we would even have to go back a notch and say maybe they were white. Right now, I don't believe so. I think they were olive and tanned for the majority, just like we see in the pictorial evidence, but keep an open mind. Alright, Noble Ones, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet members of this community, become a Noble One. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron, and most importantly, for unfiltered truth. Don't forget to check out Atlas VPN through the link in the description below, and thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.